Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us today for our webinar series, Strategies for Effective GHG Management. Today marks part one of our three-part webinar series, and today's webinar focuses on ways that companies can derive business value from GHG management strategies. My name is Holly Capel, Corporate Sustainability Associate at SCS Global Services, and I am joined today by Tobias Schultz, Manager of Corporate Sustainability Services for SCS. During today's webinar, Tobias will talk through some of the basics of corporate GHG management and then dive into specific examples of ways to generate business value from these strategies. A few housekeeping items. If you have questions, feel free to type as we go via the chat window, and we will respond to them at the end. You are muted, so if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please use the chat function or shoot me a quick email. The webinar is being recorded and you will have access to the recording shortly after the webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to briefly introduce SCS Global Services. A handful of you have previously done business with SCS and know us as your certification body, a leader in environmental and social responsibility claims for over 30 years. SCS has over 25 years of climate-related experience, and our technical team has expertise at every stage of climate-related action, from developing your baseline GHG inventory, verifying existing GHG inventories, guiding you on setting reduction targets, and overall GHG management strategy planning. And now I'm going to hand it over to Tobias Schultz to discuss how to generate business value from corporate GHG management.
Thanks, Holly, for that introduction. And yeah, I'm going to get into the meat of the slides here today, talking through ways that companies can generate business value from greenhouse gas management strategies, as she said. And I first want to set the table for the conversation by just giving some background and context on what we mean precisely by greenhouse gas management when we're talking about a corporate context. And if you've been in any of our previous webinars from 2016 on climate action planning and greenhouse gas management, this will be familiar to you. But I'm going to go over the 5 key pieces of a greenhouse gas management plan once again, just to refresh our memories if you did see the previous webinars. So the first step in a greenhouse gas management plan is to measure and verify your carbon footprint, also known as the greenhouse gas inventory. Once you've completed that measurement, you can then set targets for reduction, create policies to help reduce your emissions, go carbon neutral using carbon offsets, and finally verify carbon neutrality and report on your achievements. So I won't go over in depth what these steps are. You can refer to our recorded webinars from last year, which are available on the SCS website. Now I'll be diving into 5 ways to generate business value. And so these aren't the only ways that companies can generate business value from climate action planning. These are just 5 very common ways and 5 very good ways that we've seen that companies exploit climate action plans and greenhouse gas plans they've generated in order to derive business value. So what are these 5 ways? I'll walk through them one by one, and then I'm going to go into more depth for each and present case studies. So the first way that I'll speak about today is boosting sales through the marketing of climate-friendly products. So products which have a greenhouse gas benefit compared to competing products, or which have been able to reduce greenhouse gas emissions across the supply chain, have an opportunity to boost sales of that product through marketing to the right client segments. The second way is to enhance brand recognition. So companies which develop plans can then talk about their corporate policies to do so in order to bolster the recognition of their brand in the marketplace. The third way, and this applies to companies that are seeking either grant funding or investor type funding, is that these types of plans can help improve chances to get that type of money and capital. The fourth way is that these types of plans can help to improve energy efficiency across operations and supply chain, which can directly reduce costs. And the fifth way that I will speak about is companies can anticipate supply chain disruptions from climate change, and that can help avoid threats resulting from climate changes that are projected, and also help to identify opportunities, business opportunities that could exist. So I'll now dive a little bit deeper into the first one and go through into each of these in more depth sequentially. So first, talking about boosting sales for climate-friendly markets. So there's a few ways to do this, or ways that this type of marketing can help grow sales. So for one thing, marketing of a greenhouse gas friendly product can help grow your sales pipeline. You're able to market the greenhouse gas benefits of your product to reach new market and customer segments, help engage with existing customers, and things like on-product labeling about greenhouse gas benefits can help to generate interest with consumers by differentiating products from competing offerings. In addition to growing the pipeline, this type of marketing can help to increase the closure rate and close those sales once they're already in the pipeline. So this is possible by differentiating your products from the competition using greenhouse gas attributes, and then using these types of marketing in the sales process directly to help close deals. So I'm going to talk about a few tips on building a marketing campaign around greenhouse gas benefits in order to boost these sales, and then I'm going to go into a couple of case examples of companies which have used the beneficial greenhouse gas attributes of their products to help market and get sales. So first, a few of these tips. Use numbers in these types of greenhouse gas campaigns. Numerical tools like life cycle assessment lend credibility and help to cement the benefits of a product in terms of climate in customers' minds. Credibility is essential when you're making these types of claims, so working with external parties and external stakeholders can help bolster the perception of your marketing campaign just by ensuring credibility. And it's very important to focus your efforts on the best markets that are going to be receptive to these types of claims. You obviously don't want to market a greenhouse gas benefit to a segment of customers that's not very important to. It's important to instead prioritize those customers who will be most interested in greenhouse gas benefits. And finally, we found that it's important to be creative. There's a lot of products marketing their greenhouse gas benefits entering the marketplace today, and using new approaches to talk about and measure and disclose and announce those types of greenhouse gas benefits can really help differentiate your products during marketing campaigns. So going now into a couple of case examples. So the first one I'll speak about is a recent SCS client, CTC Global. So CTC manufactures a high-efficiency electrical transmission line. So essentially this technology reduces line losses associated with transmitting electricity, which can therefore reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And so CTC worked with SCS in order to certify the CO2 reductions that this technology achieves. And once they were awarded this certification by SCS, they used the language about the certification and their marketing collateral. So you can see here a quote from myself in the press release that went out speaking about the benefits of their technology, which is called the ACCC conductor. And then they also are currently sharing the published certificate on the CTC website. It's also on the SCS website, and pointing their customers to see this, so there's evidence and credibility behind the greenhouse gas claim. Another case example of a client that we worked with recently is New Leaf Paper. So this company engaged with SCS to evaluate a comprehensive life cycle assessment for their premier 100% recycled paper product. So this is the first 100% post-consumer waste recycled paper product of a high, what's called a coated free sheet grade that entered the marketplace. And using the LCA methods and tools that SCS applied, we established that there is as much as a 99% reduction in greenhouse gases for this recycled product compared to competing products. So quite a compelling greenhouse gas benefit, and New Leaf Paper has used this in marketing campaigns over the past almost 2 years now since the study was released. Just a few ways that New Leaf has used this. The study itself, when it was first released, it was launched at the Sustainable Brands Metrics Conference in 2015. So Jeff Mendelson, the CEO, announced the finished study at the main stage for this conference and in a dedicated session to the topic of life cycle assessment. So we had an audience of over 100 potential buyers on the main stage and even more in the workshop. New Leaf also engaged with several NGOs to release press releases about the very compelling greenhouse gas benefits of their products as well, so using different channels to further market those benefits. And New Leaf is using the study today in conversations with buyers about the benefits of their paper product, not only in terms of greenhouse gases, but also in terms of other impact categories as well. So these are just a few examples of how this client of ours, of SCS's New Leaf paper, used these documentation of the greenhouse gas benefits of their product in several types of marketing campaigns. Now moving on to the second way that businesses are generating business value with greenhouse gas management, and this is by enhancing brand recognition. So many investors and customers today are expecting greenhouse gas action by companies. Now, greenhouse gas actions taken by your company is something that you can market directly to broad customer segments and other stakeholder segments such as investors. So this can have several benefits, such as amplifying product marketing efforts you already have going on by instilling images of the company brand in your customers' minds. It can help satisfy investors who are clamoring for climate action, and also prevent stakeholder concerns from arising. There's increasingly been NGOs who have been pushing particularly large companies to take aggressive greenhouse gas action, and so this can allow you to avoid having those types of stakeholder concerns. So again, I'll go through a few tips on how to use a greenhouse gas plan to enhance your brand, and then I'll talk about a couple of case examples. So a few of the tips for using these types of plans in brand enhancement. For one, the first step is to measure your greenhouse gas inventory and then to talk about it publicly in different types of marketing collateral. Lessons learned from your greenhouse gas inventory allow you to communicate publicly about your greenhouse gas plans in a detailed and very credible way. So it just lends itself to all kinds of content marketing. A key tip we make is to set big, hairy, audacious goals in terms of greenhouse gas action. This will position you well against your competitors and convince your stakeholders that you're ready to step up to the challenge of climate change. We also recommend working with partners, so this might be suppliers you wish to partner with to help reduce greenhouse gases in the supply chain through efficiency improvements or other types of projects. These types of projects and working with partners in these types of aspects can really help you to tell a great sustainability story more broadly about your company. And finally, everything that you are doing, very important to leverage these goals, actions, and strategies for brand marketing. There are many aspects of a greenhouse gas plan which you can communicate about positively and many venues for doing so. So it's really important to optimize all the actions you're taking and get as much business value as you can out of it. So now a few examples of companies using greenhouse gas planning to enhance their brand. So Delta Airlines, this goes back to 2012 when Delta Airlines first joined the climate registry. So they evaluated their greenhouse gas inventory and verified it in this year. This is the year SCS provided a third-party verification of the greenhouse gas inventory. So this, as you can see here, this was pulled from a press release online. This allowed Delta to talk about the steps it's taking to measure its greenhouse gas emissions and begin on a road to reduce them. And so you can see this gave all kinds of positive talking points that Delta Airlines was able to use. If you read through this, statements like Delta is the first legacy carrier to meet the requirements of the registry, so clearly allowing for positive and constructive positioning against its competitors. Another large company that is using its greenhouse gas planning very proactively is Biogen, which is a pharmaceutical company based in the East Coast. So this is just a snapshot from the Biogen webpage, and Biogen has had a long-term program for carbon neutrality where they have been measuring the greenhouse gas inventory, taking steps to reduce it, and then to go carbon neutral across their entire supply chain going back to 2014. And Biogen uses this in all kinds of marketing campaigns at various conferences on the webpage, as you can see here, and other types of collateral. So just some ways that this company has used it. Another example is a greenhouse gas inventory we recently completed and worked with, and this was for with Guayaki Sustainable Rainforest Products. So Chris Mann, the leader of Guayaki, talked about this project at last year's conference, Natural Products Expo West. So you can see he joined this session, Time to Lead on Climate. So this was an excellent opportunity for Chris to talk about the proactive steps his company was taking in terms of greenhouse gas planning and talk about it in front of his peers at this conference, as well as other customers and other interested stakeholders. So conferences are a great way to talk about this in front of important stakeholder sets. So thinking about a particularly audacious goal that you can set as a company in terms of greenhouse gas planning, this is to go carbon neutral. So this involves first measuring the greenhouse gas inventory across all operations and preferably the supply chain, and then buying enough carbon offsets in order to go net neutral across all operations. And so SES works closely with the Arbor Day Foundation. Arbor Day Foundation provides carbon offsets based in forestry projects in North America and also in other parts of the world. And Arbor Day Foundation has partnered with, for example, the Wyndham hotel chain to have a carbon neutral program across hotels. And SES has worked with Arbor Day with other companies to develop carbon neutral programs to have a turnkey solution to evaluate the inventory and go carbon neutral. A case example of a type of project there where companies used a greenhouse gas action tactic to market and improve their brand. So this was a forest offset project in Big River and Salmon Creek in Northern California. So this is a project where essentially the forest operator reduced and protected a certain area of land. You can see 16,000 acres of redwood forest in this region, saving over 500,000 tons of CO2 annually, as well as providing improved water quality and habitat for coho, salmon, steelhead trout, and spotted owl, so several endangered species. So SES verified this project, which was funded by the ACE Group and Centex. Now this allowed these two companies to market very proactively the types of investments they're making in sustainable and climate-friendly products like this. So you can see the ACE Group mentioned this project in press releases and in their 2014 sustainability report. And so in this partnership, SES and Arbor Day are able to support companies like ACE to find the best ways to get business value from carbon offset investments. So moving on now to the next approach for getting business value, and this is for improving opportunities for funding if this is something that your company has a need for. So if your company is seeking investment to perhaps scale up its operation, a greenhouse gas plan could help to acquire funds from sustainable responsible impact funds, which have been growing very rapidly over the last several years. There may also be grants available for certain types of projects in certain types of regions, depending on the technology and project you're looking to get funded. So some of the types of projects which could be eligible based on our experience, so these are technologies which reduce greenhouse gases during manufacturing and production, supply chain projects to reduce greenhouse gases, and also just new types of products with lowered greenhouse gas emissions. So for example, we were advising a company that was examining ways to improve its manufacturing facility to have a lower greenhouse gas type technology. The next way that businesses can derive value is by improving efficiency in order to save costs. So evaluating a greenhouse gas inventory will provide you with information on energy use, which can allow you to identify high and low performers for energy efficiency. So this can help you to prioritize investments to save energy, which can obviously reduce costs through reduced fuel purchases. It can also point you towards inefficiencies in transportation and amongst your suppliers, which might be other low-hanging fruit for reducing greenhouse gases and saving costs. And now the fifth item on how companies can derive business value that I'll talk about. So this is anticipating supply chain disruptions from climate change. So this first step of evaluating the greenhouse gas inventory, this is a great opportunity to learn about your supply chain. and then begin to evaluate threats and opportunities which climate change may present. So there may be business issues you weren't previously aware of, both on sort of the upside and the downside, in terms of opportunities from different changes in things like crop growing regions, so new regions that are able to grow different crops, but also threats where conversely existing crop growing regions may have a more difficult time growing because of increased temperatures and changes in rainfall patterns and that sort of thing. So now this is very important to consider holistically at the supply chain level when you consider just the projections of a temperature change for later this century. This is a map from the IPCC's fifth assessment report of essentially the business as usual case for the end of the century. And as you can see, the pinks and purples indicate increased temperature change compared to the present day, or the 1986-2005 average to be precise. As you can see, there's entire world regions that are getting up to over 6 degrees Celsius projected increase from today. And you can see over major blocks of Asia and North America increases of 3 and 4 degrees Celsius all over the place. So clearly, big trends in warming are anticipated. And this will lead to all kinds of impacts around the world. So this is a chart straight out of this IPCC report that documents impacts to physical systems, biological systems, and human and managed systems. So I won't talk about this chart in detail. The point here is just to make that there's all kinds of impacts projected all over the place. So for example, if you look at human and managed systems, the little tractor icons indicate where there'll be negative impacts from climate change on food production. As you can see, there's a little tractor in parts of Africa, Asia, South America, and Australia and other parts of the world. So clearly quite widespread impacts to many world systems. Particularly crops will probably be and agriculture will be a quite hard-hit economic sector. This is another chart from this IPCC report looking at the spread of model projections on models which project decreases in yield in crop yields, that's in orange, versus increases in crop yield in blue. So what I'll say to highlight here is that while there are going to be some opportunities from increased crop productions and yields in new regions, which is indicated by the blue chart, the orange bars are much higher than that, so that indicates decreases in crop yields in many types of parts of the world. So clearly supply chain disruptions, both positive and negative, across many world regions. Now, how to gear up your adaptation strategy. The most common approach is the one that SCS employs, and it's a 7-step approach here. The first is to establish the context, so that involves understanding your supply chain and understanding what context you're going to look across. Once that's been established, you then want to assess your risks through risk identification of what types of climate change risks might be salient, analysis of those risks, looking at the consequences of a particular impact and the likelihood of the impact occurring, and then a risk evaluation of determining whether adaptation may be required in order to respond to those climate change risks. Once risk has been assessed, you can then treat them either through adaptation or through adaptation by first identifying and assessing potential strategies and then implementing these strategies for adaptation, and then going on to monitor and review climate risks and adaptation strategies to see how they're working, and then carry this on as an iterative process as time goes on. So these are sort of the most well-known and common steps universal to any type of climate change adaptation strategy. So I'll now just conclude by talking at a high level about some of the aspects I've already spoken about on how to ensure you get your maximum value from your greenhouse gas management. So I've talked about several of them today, but clearly a first step within your specific business context is to identify which opportunities for business value actually do exist. So what ways could you exploit to have business value from a greenhouse gas plan? Once you've done that, you want to ensure you take steps to optimize the business value that's realized from the steps that you do take. A key tip that we always recommend is learning from your peers, seeing what your competition is doing. And in 2 weeks, I'll be speaking about a webinar where I'll talk about that in detail. And so these steps will really help you get to business value from your greenhouse gas management planning. So if you need help in managing your company's greenhouse gas emissions and setting up a plan, you can work with SCS to set up a plan, including all steps from greenhouse gas inventory evaluation, target setting, policy development, and carbon neutrality. We can also help you take steps to develop business value by leveraging us as a marketing partner. You've seen some examples of ways that we've helped clients evaluate greenhouse gas benefits and talk about it publicly, and that's something we offer as part of a partnership in our services. So with that, we will take questions and answers now. Holly, take us away with the Q&A.
Thanks, Tobias. So feel free to type in your questions into the chat window, and we will get to as many questions as we can. We've had a few questions come in already. Let me just read through these really quick. Okay, the first question, did these companies actually demonstrate improved revenue from these actions?
Yes, so this is a great question, and clearly if we're talking about business value, having some metrics and numbers behind that's very important. I have a few hard numbers I can share. One of the clients we've worked with, we did a joint webinar with, which had nearly 200 registrants. So this was really good, especially since it included several major buyers for our client. We also released the technical report and some other marketing materials. The technical report alone was the most downloaded document ever from the SCS website with over 1,000 downloads. The webinar itself led to 50 or so solid leads for the clients, and we had shared some promising leads with the client as well through some of these paper downloads. So if you track that all the way through the sales life cycle, this really resulted in a great ROI for this company. And that was just through a couple of these outlets that I've mentioned. So this is just a webinar and the single technical report, and this company has continued to use this in marketing over time. So clearly a lot of benefit there.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tobias. The next question, what is the likelihood of actually having grants available now? What is the likelihood of actually receiving grants now?
Yeah, so this is a good question, and the types of grants that are available, it very much depends on what type of grant it is that you're looking for. So there are, in the U.S., there are government programs for specific types of technologies through the Department of Energy and others. This question may be related to recent changes in the federal government that may put some of those grant sources in question. However, if you look at other sources such as through state grant funding sources, those probably won't change. And also additionally, there's philanthropic grant funding sources that are really quite common nowadays. So things like the Gates Foundation and other types of philanthropic foundations have all kinds of grants and that can be available to various types of greenhouse gas projects. The challenge with grants is really making sure that matching up the project that you're interested in having funded with the types of grant requirements that a certain philanthropic group or government agency may have of interest.
Thanks, Tobias. The next question, can you provide examples of ways companies can get visibility for efforts they are making in GHG management?
Yeah, so I talked through a few case examples of how some of the clients we've worked with, how they are getting this type of visibility. And really generally, if you're selling in a business-to-business context, then this stuff is generally great fodder for content marketing pieces and themed advertising and branding. I'll talk about business-to-business and business-to-consumer separately. So for B2B context, this type of marketing is perfect for things like conferences, blog posts, white papers, webinars, this sort of thing, all those types of things that are great for reaching a more sophisticated and informed business audience. Now, if you're selling in a consumer context, clearly you're going to have to exploit different channels to reach them. But this type of greenhouse gas planning, it makes for great information on company web pages. things like blog posts, which consumers may read if you're in the right blog, is a good way. And even advertising and product labeling efforts can be really valuable as well, provided they're sort of communicated in a way that consumers can understand. You know, that can really help to gain the interest of consumers, particularly certain types of consumers in certain regions, to help differentiate against competition and help to build engagement.
Great, thanks, Tobias. The next question, aside from utility companies or federal grants, where else can businesses find grants?
Yeah, you know, this is a good question, and we can send out. There's actually we published a blog post summarizing some of these issues, and there's actually a list of specific philanthropic groups that we published there. That includes a list of specific philanthropies that have various types of grant funding projects. Yeah, and there's specific types of federal grants which maybe, you know, won't or may not have at the core the aim to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but sometimes grants will, you know, consider that positively. There might be a grant funding for a new type of technology for another reason, to, you know, have jobs in a new region or what have you, but then having environmental and positive climate attributes can really help positively, even if it's not at the very core of the grant.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tobias. The next question is, what are some goals that companies should set in order to differentiate or enhance their brand?
Yeah, so this is another good question. There's there's many types of goals that companies can set. I mean, sort of at a baseline is setting goals for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, you know, within a 5 or a 10 and commonly now even a 20 or a longer year time frame. Out to some companies are even setting goals out to 2050, the year 2050. There's other types of goals that can be set. So, for example, setting targets for procurement of 100% renewable energy. So there's some market leaders in the space, such as Google, that have set targets for 100% renewable energy and are already starting to track very close to the goal or even achieve it. Another type of really good way to distinguish your brand is by setting goals for carbon neutrality. So this is a more aggressive goal that will help distinguish you from your competitors, because it's sort of more on the cutting edge. Intangible goals like this, they make for really great marketing stories and can help to set you apart. They're sort of ideal stuff for content marketing types of pieces. So, for example, a goal for a company I mentioned today was the company in Guayaquil is committed to stewarding and protecting 200,000 acres of forests by 2020. So that's more of a creative type of goal that does have real positive climate implications. So we're looking through some other questions here.
Okay, the next question we have, how do you deal with climate change deniers who, as soon as you say anthropogenic global warming, shut down and won't listen to anything you have to say?
So that's definitely a tough question. I think that a lot of what I've spoken about today is exactly the types of talking points that can be really helpful in, you know, skirting and avoiding those types of conversations. So clearly, if there's able to demonstrate business value in the marketplace today, I mean, that's can be a compelling talking point by itself. Particularly, think there's more and more just an expectation that companies will have these types of plans in place. So I think really trying to avoid any type of politicized or scientific discussion over issues like that, and really instead focus on the kind of positive business value that can be derived. It's a really good way to tackle that type of issue.
Okay, great. Thank you. One more question, or another question. How prevalent is carbon neutrality in the marketplace? Is this something that most companies are pursuing?
Yeah, so carbon neutrality is definitely an emerging trend in the market. There's a lot of companies that are committing to going carbon neutral across their brand, and even more sort of in an innovative sense, purchasing offsets to go carbon neutral for particular product lines. So some very ambitious companies have really kind of wedded those goals and set goals to go neutral across their entire corporate supply chain as well. So the first step in going carbon neutral is setting a time frame target for doing so. So these types of carbon neutrality targets very often for companies are longer term targets, as complete carbon neutrality can be difficult to achieve and potentially expensive depending on what your supply chain looks like and how many greenhouse gas emissions are associated with it. So what we're seeing today is that carbon neutrality claims are not yet as widespread as other green marketing claims, but that's kind of a positive too because it can allow you to really use them to distinguish your brand in the marketplace.
Okay, thanks, Tobias. One last question, I think. How do you evaluate business risk from climate change across the whole supply chain?
Yeah, so this is a really step-by-step process, and some of the details do vary kind of based on the company and the the supply chain involved. And this evaluation of business risk from climate change, there aren't sort of single methods or standards for doing so, but the very common approach that I spoke about today is pretty ubiquitous. The approach that we use at SCS is common across the field, which I spoke about. So this first involves identifying salient climate change risks to your supply chain. So this means specifically things like sea level rise, which might impact a factory in a low-lying coastal area, increasing drought frequency, which could present issues for agricultural commodities or, again, factories or chemical producing facilities that, say, consume a lot of water. So first identifying climate change risks like that, and then the likelihood of those impacts from those risks occurring. So if there's a factory in a low-lying area, say 2 feet above the mean sea level, what's the likelihood of sea level rising over 2 feet in the next couple of decades that could actually have an impact on the factory? Or other specific examples, if there's a farm in, Idaho or Africa or any part of the world, what types of regional climate alterations and effects on precipitation, extreme heat, etc., could affect growing yields and quality. Now, once those risks are identified and the likelihood rated, and you can exploit a lot of the wealth of published literature on that, there's quite detailed information on different types of climate change projections summarized by IPCC and others. Then it's a matter of translating that into the magnitude of impact which would happen to the operation in question. So I'm going back to this factory example, because it's sort of a simple one. Now clearly if the factory is 2 feet above sea level and there's a high likelihood within a few decades that sea level in this region will impact that factory, I mean clearly that could be quite a significant magnitude of impact because it could potentially disrupt the whole city and region and present all kinds of challenges. So once you've identified those real hotspots of vulnerability, then it becomes a question of how to adapt to those. And really the process I talked through so far of climate change risk assessment, that gets you to a baseline of understanding your risk and then being able to go on and from an informed perspective start to take actions to adapt to it.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tobias. We have another question come in. Is there a mechanism to set the value of carbon offset credits in light of the carbon market collapse in the EU and the absence of a broad carbon market in the US?
Yeah, so this is certainly a complicated question. Now the carbon market, offset market itself is sort of fragmented in several separate pieces. So for one, there's the voluntary carbon offset market, and so this is where carbon offsets can be purchased. That's essentially the market that we work with when we're working with Arbor Day Foundation to purchase carbon offsets not related to any type of legal or compliance driver. And so that has its own kind of market dynamic with specific pricing involved. I believe that the average price on the voluntary market is around $3 per ton of CO2 today. Now that's a very different question than, for example, in the state of California, it's had its established carbon offset market under the cap and trade program. Because of the compliance drivers are more significant within that market, the price of those carbon offsets are quite a bit higher than on the voluntary market. So in terms of the mechanisms for sort of the valuation of carbon offset credits on the market, this really depends on kind of the market conditions and also the projects involved as well. Even on the voluntary market, there's certain types of projects that trade at above average pricing because of things like the sustainability attributes that have additional value for them as well.
Okay, great. I think that's all the questions we've had come in. And I'd like to also mention that we are offering a free consultation if you'd like to discuss with us ways to develop a plan for getting maximum value from your GHG management. So feel free to contact me. I have my contact information on this slide if you'd like to set up a free consultation. And we have 2 more webinars coming up in this series, so be sure to join us. We have our Scope 3 Inventories for Purchased Goods and Services Credible on February 8th, and Steps to Keep Pace with and Go Beyond Your Competition's GHG Management Planning on February 15th. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you again at our upcoming webinars.